Okay, I would like to call the March 2nd, 2026 meeting of the City of Huntington Board of Zoning Appeals to order. Miranda, could you please do a roll call?
Norris Friesen, Ashley Allen, Christopher Penny,
Here.
Tanner Babb,
Here.
Amy Richard.
Here.
Okay, at this point, you all have received the minutes. I will entertain a motion for approval of the minutes unless there's any changes requested.
I will second.
Did you make the motion, Amy?
I will make a motion
Okay.
to approve the minutes.
Second, okay.
Me.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, at this point, are there any declarations of conflicts of interest on any of the dockets today?
Yeah, I have potential conflict of interest with two of them, BZ 26005 and BZ 26006. These are both for the Church of the Nazarene. My son goes to preschool there.
Okay. Is there anything else?
I mean, yeah, that's really the only connection, but
Okay.
it is a connection nonetheless. They do a good job with them, but
Okay. And at this point, are there any questions from the board about that?
I would just say I don't see that as a problem, just here.
No, I don't either. You don't have any financial interest in that. And, I do have a conflict with docket BZ 26-007, BZ-26-008, and BZ-26-009. I serve on the board of the Bowen Center Board of Directors, and I've been recused from previous Bowen Center votes because of that.
I would feel that is appropriate this time, too.
Okay. All right, we will jump into our first docket, docket BZ-26-002. This is application filed by Bob Goins on behalf of K&J Investments, requesting a variance from development standards to allow a dynamic sign on property located at 2703 Guilford Street. At this point, could the applicant step to the podium and state their name and address for the record and explain their request?
Hello, my name is Bob Goins. Address is 1448 Connor Street. Representing K&J Investments 38, and our first request is sorry, I'm not used to speaking into a microphone. All right. Yeah, so it would look just like that right there. We are 5.5 by 10 feet. This would be a static image. Custard. Rolling, it is not we've requested variance for that. You've probably seen it, but I did bring a picture of it. There is an EMC
Okay, are there any questions that the board members have for the applicant? Okay, thank you. At this point, we will open the meeting to the public and invite anyone else who wants to speak for or against this request to come forward and state their name and address. Okay, at this point, we'll declare the public hearing portion of the meeting closed. Bryn, could you please read the staff report for us?
Dynamic signs or electronic message centers are not expressly permitted by any right in any zoning district within the city of Huntington. Allowable on a case-by-case basis, this permits the BZA to carefully weigh the potential impacts to adjacent uses and evaluate the necessity for such type signage. With an underlying interest in safety in mind, the BZA's review should also center on, among other things, the size of the sign and the frequency of message change. The subject property is located at the northwest corner of Guilford Street and US Highway 24. The current parcel has 517 feet of limited access road frontage along US Highway 24 and 681 feet of frontage along Guilford Street. The intersection is signalized and arguably the second most busy intersection in the city. At a 4,615 square foot Culver's restaurant with 77 parking spaces is currently being constructed at this location and will utilize the existing driveways. The subject property is presently 8.23 acres in size, and approximately 1.8 of that site being at the corner of the intersection will eventually be subdivided out. The resulting proposed lot will end just north of the existing southern driveway and provide access via that driveway. The subject property in the immediate vicinity is surrounded to the north by undeveloped lots, financial services, and a restaurant. To the east, a hotel. To the south, US 24, and immediately adjacent to Huntington University on the other side. To the west, financial services, restaurants, and retail uses. The nearest residential properties are 620 feet northwest and 650 feet southwest. The applicant seeks to install a two-sided pole-style dynamic sign at this location along US 24, utilizing the existing sign frame located approximately 250 feet east of Guilford Street and perpendicular to US 24. The proposed sign structure will contain two sign cabinets, an upper 9x15 oval-shaped static cabinet at 106.03 square feet, and a lower 5-foot 5-inch by 10-foot 3-inch EMC cabinet at 55.52 square feet. Overall, the signs will total 161.55 square feet in size, with 65.6% of the sign being static and 34.4% of the sign being the dynamic portion. The sign would be approximately 43 feet tall, although it is noted that being an approximate measurement. Important to note is that given the maximum allowable pole sign height of 40 feet, some shortening of the sign supports may need to occur. The dynamic sign portion is to be mounted at a height of about 35 feet. Subject property is Zone B2 business. The relevant sign provisions within the zoning code, 158.03006C, for properties within this zoning district allow for wall, ground, and pole signs. Pole signs are subject to the following requirements. By code, animation is limited to being static, maximum sign area of 81 square feet, maximum height of 40 feet, minimum sign clearance of 8 feet above grade. The location must be set back 5 feet from the property line, is allowed to be illuminated. Staff is unable to locate any prior approvals for this property. Since 2010, dynamic signs within the city of Huntington have been considered by the BZA on a site-specific basis through the variance process. A review of all prior cases results in 18 dynamic signs having been considered by the BZA, 16 of which have been approved with strict conditions governing their execution and operation. The denial of 2 dynamic sign requests in 2017 and 2023 were for dynamic signs proposed to be located within established residential neighborhoods. The 16 signs that have been approved were located within established commercially zoned areas or along major highway roadways, or major high-traffic roadways, rather. Of those, four were in areas where residential uses were nearby or adjacent. All of the others were along busier roadways. Notable was that 2 of the 4 signs were upgrades to existing legal nonconforming dynamic signs, so they were not being newly introduced into their particular neighborhood. The other 2 signs were for higher traffic count locations, and the dynamic portion of those signs comprised between 25% and 38% of the overall signed area. The history of related approvals and denials thereby establishes the current precedent concerning dynamic sign request to this body. The nearest dynamic sign is located directly across US 24 at Huntington University. Dynamic sign approvals have ranged from 10.6 to 75% EMC of the overall sign area, with the median being about 35.9. This particular request, as stated, is for a sign that is 34.4%. As the board is aware, each approval must be monitored, and dynamic signs represent a unique compliance challenge. The department aims to revisit each site annually to check compliance, and when compared to other BZA approvals, programmable signage has a higher problem rate in adhering to any conditions of approvals. If approved, the board should impress upon the property owner the expectations relating to compliance and avenues for noncompliance, which range from penalties to revocation of approval. In preparation of your decision tonight, staff has prepared some recommended findings. As always, the board can adopt these findings. The board can create their own findings. The board can adopt the applicant's findings or any combination thereof. Number one, the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community because staff finds that the proposed dynamic sign will only comprise a portion of the overall area of the sign. The sign will be installed per manufacturer's specifications and meet applicable safety requirements. The approval will be conditioned accordingly to safeguard against concerns associated with this type of messaging device. Number two, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property, including the variance, will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner because staff finds that the type of sign will have no impact on the overall usage of the property, as it will remain unchanged. Dynamic signs have existed in this area in growing numbers and directly across the street for the past 8 years. Conditions placed on the approval will reasonably mitigate concerns for undue impacts to residential properties, more so than the existing signage. And number three, the strict application of terms of zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties in the use of the property because staff finds that the quick service restaurant operates in a business segment where many of its specials, menu offerings, and promotions change frequently, thereby making a programmable sign a logical choice. This request is for the installation of a pole sign that will include a dynamic sign as a portion of the overall sign and allow the restaurant location to take advantage of modern technologies for advertisement and provide it with a less visually invasive way of advertising a large number or variety of projects than through temporary signs. Without adequate message conveyance, patronage of the location may be impacted so severely that its viability to exist may be negatively impacted. Based upon those findings, staff recommends approval of the request. If the board finds sufficient evidence to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions of approval. These are the same conditions that you've applied to nearly every dynamic sign since 2010. That the approval for the dynamic sign shall only apply to a pole sign in this general location. That the message change frequency shall be limited to every 6 seconds. Messages shall not be animated. That includes no bouncing, waving, scrolling, or actionable text or images. The sign shall only advertise on-premise messages, and no off-premise messages shall be displayed, and that the sign shall not be used as a billboard.
Okay, are there any questions for staff at this point?
You did catch the two
Yep.
corrections in there. My apologies.
Okay, Miranda, could you use finding of fact, please?
Number one, the approval will or will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community because
Will not, per staff finding.
Tanner Babb,
Will not.
Amy Richard,
Will not.
Christopher Penny.
Will not.
Number two, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will or will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner because
Will not, per staff finding.
Amy Richard,
Will not.
Christopher Penny,
Will not.
Tanner Babb.
Will not.
Number three, the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will or will not result in practical difficulties in the use of the property because
Will, per staff finding.
Christopher Penny,
Will.
Tanner Babb,
Will.
Amy Richard.
Will.
Okay, at this point, I will entertain a motion for approval or disapproval.
I make a motion for approval of docket BZ 26-002 with the following conditions. The approval for a dynamic sign applies only to a pole sign in this general location. The message change frequency shall be limited to every 6 seconds. The message will not be animated. The sign will only advertise on-premise messages. No off-premise messaging will be displayed, and it will not be used as a billboard.
Do I have a second?
Yes, I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign? Okay, we will move to the next docket, which is BZ-26-003. If applicant could step to the podium again and just for the recording, mention name and address and what you are proposing.
Bob Goins, 144 Street, Noblesville, Indiana. This is for the sign. Advertising that the culvert's there.
Okay, any questions for the applicant about this particular docket? Okay, thank you. Okay, at this point, if anyone from the public wishes to give public comment, they are welcome to. Okay, we will then consider the public portion of the meeting closed. Bryn, could you please read the staff report?
The purpose of size standards is multifaceted. These standards seek to carefully balance the visual environment of the city. Standards are established to carefully balance the advertising needs of businesses while minimizing potentially dangerous distractions to drivers. Secondly, standards are custom tailored by zoning districts, allowing for aesthetic controls that are sensitive to their surroundings and do not cause undue visual clutter or over-commercialization of the visual landscape. Subject property is located at the northeast corner of Guilford Street, U.S. Highway 24. The current parcel has 517 feet of limited access frontage along U.S. Highway 24 and 681 feet of frontage along Guilford Street. These intersection is signalized and arguably the second most busy intersection in the city. As I stated, a 4,615 square foot Culver's restaurant with 77 parking spaces is currently being constructed at this location, and it will utilize the existing driveways. Subject property is presently 8.23 acres in size and approximately 1.8 acres of the site at the corner. Nearest the intersection will eventually be subdivided out. The resulting proposed lot will end just north of the existing southern driveway and provide access via that driveway. Subject property is immediately surrounded by, to the north, undeveloped lots, financial services and restaurants, to the east, a hotel, to the south, US 24 and Huntington University immediately beyond. To the west, financial services, restaurant, and retail uses. The nearest residential properties are 620 feet northwest and 650 feet southwest. The applicant seeks to install a two-sided pole-style dynamic sign at this location along US 24, utilizing the existing sign frame, located approximately 250 feet east of Guilford Street and perpendicular to US 24. The proposed sign structure will contain two sign cabinets, an upper measuring 9 by 15 oval-shaped static cabinet at 106.03 square feet, and a lower 5'5" by 10'3" EMC cabinet at 55.52 square feet. Overall, the size of the sign will total 161.55 square feet in size, and the dynamic element of that sign being subject to your last docket. The sign would be approximately, again, 43 feet tall, although it's noted that this is an approximate measurement. The maximum allowable height for a pole sign is 40 feet, so some shortening of that supports or the overall top may need to adjust. The dynamic portion of the sign is to be mounted at a height of 35 feet. The subject property is Zone B2 business, and the relevant provisions within 158.03.006C for properties within this zoning district. As I stated, static signs, maximum sign area of 81 square feet, which is where the request tonight becomes for you. Maximum height of 40 feet, minimum sign clearance of 8, and a minimum setback of 5 feet, allowing the sign to be illuminated. Staff is unable to locate any prior approvals for this property, with the exception of those tonight. The proposed sign is a little less than 2 times the allowable sign area for the B2 district. The location is directly adjacent to US Highway 24, where larger traffic volumes, approximately 19,554 vehicles per day, flow through at a higher speed, ranging from 45 to 55 miles per hour, and in a much wider right-of-way at 215 feet wide. That overall scale makes it worthy of consideration for a larger sign for ease of readability, as opposed to a more urbanized location. Similarly situated pole signs and their sizes include the following: 405 square feet at Parkview Huntington Hospital, 260 square feet at Huntington University, 280 square feet at Comfort Inn, 300 square feet at Lakeside Chevy, and the average single size of a single billboard is 675 square feet. In preparation for your decision tonight, staff has prepared some recommended findings. As always, the board may adopt staff's findings, the applicant's findings, their own findings, or any combination thereof. Staff finds that the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community because the proposed sign will be installed in accordance with all applicable codes. The sign would be similar in size and character to what exists within the same area and elsewhere along this roadway. The use and value of the area adjacent to the property, including the variance, will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner because staff finds that the sign will have no impact on the overall use of the property, and uses within the area are unlikely to change as a result of the size of sign at this location. The sign is aligned to the highway and spaced sufficiently from nearby residential uses. If not allowed, a smaller size pole sign would still be permitted to be installed at this location. And 3, the strict application in terms of the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties in the use of the property. The location of the sign, some 160 feet from the center line of US 24 and elevated up to 40 feet in the air, makes the larger size necessary to adequately convey messages about services and offerings at this location, given the scale of the site, the width of the right-of-way, and the speeds at which passing motors drive by. Without adequate message conveyance, patronage of the facility may be impacted so severely that its viability to exist may be negatively impacted. Based upon the findings above, staff recommends approval. If the board finds evidence to approve the request, staff recommends the following condition: that the area variance shall only apply to this sign singularly and not to any additional signage at that site that may apply to other tenants or uses or further subdivision of the property.
Okay, any questions for the staff? Okay, Miranda, could you please read finding of fact?
Number 1, the approval will or will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community because
Will not, per staff finding.
Tanner Babb,
Will not.
Amy Richert,
Will not.
Christopher Penny.
Will not.
Number 2, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will or will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner because
Will not, per staff finding.
Christopher Penny,
Will not.
Amy Richert,
Will not.
Tanner Babb.
Will not.
Number 3, the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will or will not result in practical difficulties in the use of the property because
Will, per staff finding.
Amy Richert,
Will.
Tanner Babb,
Will.
Christopher Penny.
Will.
Okay, at this point, I will entertain a motion for this docket.
I make a motion for approval of docket BZ-26-003 with the condition that the variance applies only to this sign and not any additional signage at the site.
Do I have a second?
Yes, I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. And one more time. So, we have docket BZ-26-004. Applicant can step forward and say name and address, please.
Bob Goins, 148 Connor Street, Noblesville, Indiana. This is for a small sign on the what would be the north side of the building. It attaches to a canopy that sticks out. It's a corporate sign. They added that into our branding here about 2 years ago, so you don't see that on every culvert yet, but it's somewhat new. Just
Okay, any questions for the applicant? Okay. Thank you. Anyone from the public wishing to give comment? Okay, we will consider the public portion of the meeting closed. Bryn, could you please read the staff report?
Purpose of sign standards is multifaceted. These standards seek to carefully balance the visual environment of the city. Standards are established to carefully balance the advertising needs of businesses while minimizing potentially dangerous distractions to drivers. Secondly, standards are custom tailored by zoning district, allowing for aesthetic controls that are sensitive to their surroundings and do not cause undue visual clutter or over-commercialization of the visual landscape. The subject property is located at the northeast corner of Guilford Street and US Highway 24. Current parcel is 517 feet of limited access road frontage along along US Highway 24 and 681 feet of frontage along Guilford Street. The intersection is signalized and arguably the second most busy intersection in the city. A 4,615 square foot Culver's restaurant with 77 parking spaces is currently being constructed at this location and will utilize the existing driveways. Subject property is presently 8.23 acres in size, and approximately 1.8 acres of the site at the corner nearest the intersection will eventually be subdivided out. The resulting proposed lot will end just north of the existing southern driveway and provide access via that driveway. Subject property is immediately surrounded to the north by undeveloped lots, financial services, and restaurants, to the east a hotel, to the south US 24 with Huntington University immediately adjacent, and to the west financial services, restaurant, and retail uses. The nearest residential property is 620 feet to the northwest and 650 feet to the southwest. The applicant seeks to install a total of 5 wall signs on this building at this location. Those signs would include one logo on each of the elevation and an additional sign on the facade facing the driveway to the north that states Butter Burgers and Frozen Custard. From discussions with the applicants, the Culver logo sign are the 4 must-have signs, and the Butter Burgers and Frozen Custard text are viewed as the additional or extra sign for which this variance is being sought. Therefore, the particulars of that Butter Burgers and Frozen Custard sign are an illuminated sign cabinet featuring text that measures 275 inches long and 7.7 inches tall, and total about 14.71 square feet in gross size. I've got the elevation, some photos, some general location stuff to help you better visualize where that sign would be. The sign cabinet is actually applied to the face of a truss extension serving a flat roof or projected overhang shielding the concrete sidewalk below in the drive-through queue. Visibility of the sign as proposed would be limited to those patrons essentially already in the driveway on the property, as the size and scale of the text is generally believed to be illegible from Guilford Street. The subject property is Zone B2 Business. The relevant sign provisions of the zoning code in 158.03006C for properties within this zoning district allow for wall, ground, and pole signs, wall signs being subject to the following: 2 on-premise signs per road frontage, from which the following list are permitted. Where multiple tenants occupy a structure, those shall apply to each tenant individually. Static in animation, a maximum size area per sign of 49 square feet, a maximum sign height of 30 feet, location on a wall, illumination, yes. Staff is unable to locate any prior approvals for this property. The applicant states that the total of 4 wall signs does not, quote, allow for adequate identification of the restaurant use for drive-through patrons. It is unclear how this could be the case when each facade is being planned for a logo size of either 29 or 46 square feet. The wall sign on the drive-through side being a smaller size. If this were the case, it could be argued that the sign on this facade should then be logically increased to one of the 46 square foot in size for the most possible visual identification within the 49 square foot maximum size. In addition, the larger and taller pole sign is visible from all sides of this property as well. Are there identification concerns for the drive-through patrons alone? That is undetermined. If so, there are options available in the ordinance to provide for additional signage. For example, 158.03001F1 and K provides that window signs are exempt from permitting and counting requirements against totals, and at least 4 sets of windows and the drive-through itself are located on the drive-through facade, which could literally be filled with signage. Other exemptions also exist for directional signs, drive-through signs, menu order boards, and etc. under the current provisions of the code. Staff feels that each of these represents potential reasonable alternatives already available under the terms of the ordinance that do not require a variance from the standards and could generally be employed to meet the stated desires of the applicant. This location and the placement of the building on the site were chosen for one reason: exposure to US 24, and more specifically the visibility to and access from the intersection at Guilford Street. Visibility from any other direction is by and large made up of local traffic that will eventually be very familiar with this location and its offerings a few months after opening. The elevations provided by the applicant clearly show that identification of this location as a Culver's restaurant is clear in each of the views by affording it at least one sign per facade. How those signs are employed and the wording utilized within the allowable signs unit size limits are all up to the applicant to utilize to meet their individual objectives. The applicant does not detail whether any of these other options were explored or how the lack of a 5th wall sign would ultimately impact the use of the property. In preparation of your decision tonight, staff's prepared some recommended findings. As always, the board can adopt staff's findings, their own findings, the applicant's findings, or any combination thereof. Number one, staff finds that the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community because the proposed sign will be installed in accordance with all applicable codes. The sign will also be installed per manufacturer's specifications and meet the applicable safety requirements. Number two, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner because staff finds that the additional wall sign will have no impact on the overall use of the property, and uses within the area are unlikely to change as a result of the number of wall signs at this location. The sign is buffered sufficiently from nearby residential uses. And number three, the strict application of terms of the zoning ordinance will not result in practical difficulties in the use of the property because staff finds that the property is already afforded 4 wall signs to identify its prominent location along a U.S. highway and at the second busiest signalized intersection of the city. The building under construction will be visible from all road frontages, and code allows for an unlimited number of wall signs in addition to those 4 that could be utilized to identify the restaurant. Code also allows for directional signage to be employed, although it be of significantly less size. All of these items represent reasonable alternatives afforded under the ordinance without the need for variance. The applicant has failed to meet the burden of proof by illustrating how only 4 wall signs would ultimately impact the use of the property for this use or any other potential use, and whether any other reasonable alternatives, including those mentioned in the staff report, have been explored, and why those may or may not potentially meet the needs of the applicant in this particular location. Based upon the findings above, staff recommends denial. If the board finds sufficient evidence to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions of approval: that the variance shall only apply to this sign singularly and not any additional signage at that site that may apply to other tenants or uses or further subdivisions of the property.
And Bren, just one correction in your findings. The code allows for unlimited window signs, not wall signs. So.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions for staff? Okay, Miranda, could you read findings of fact, please?
Number 1, the approval will or will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community because
Will not, per staff finding.
Tanner Babb,
Will not.
Amy Richert,
Will not.
Christopher Penny.
Will not.
Number 2, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will or will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner because
Will not, per staff finding.
Christopher Penny,
Will not.
Amy Richert,
Will not.
Tanner Babb.
Will not.
Number 3, the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will or will not result in practical difficulties in the use of the property because
Will not, per staff finding.
Tanner Babb,
Will not.
Christopher Penny,
Will not.
Amy Richert.
Will not.
Okay, at this time, I will entertain a motion on the docket.
I make a motion that docket BZ 26-004 be denied.
Do I have a second?
I will second, yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, docket BZ-26-004 is denied. Okay, next docket is BZ-26-005, application filed by the Baldus Company on behalf of First Church of the Nazarene, requesting a variance from the development standards to allow a dynamic sign on property located at 1555 Flax Mill Road. Could the applicant step to the podium and please say your name and address for the recording?
Good evening, I'm Andrew Schulenberg, Baldus Company, 440 East Brackenridge, Fort Wayne.
Okay, and state your request.
This request is to replace the existing reader board with a
Okay, are there any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone wishing to give public comment? Okay, then we will close the public hearing portion of the meeting. Bryn, could you please read staff report?
Yeah. Dynamic signs or electronic message centers are not expressly permitted by any right in any zoning district within the city of Huntington. Allowable on a case-by-case basis, this permits the BZA to carefully weigh the potential impacts to adjacent uses and evaluate the necessity for such type sign. With an underlying interest in safety of mind, the BZA's review should also center on, among other things, the size of the sign, the frequency of message change. The 15-acre subject property is located on the west side of US Highway 24 and on the south side of Flax Mill Road and north of US 24 and West Park Drive. Parcel has approximately 1,300 feet of limited access road frontage along US Highway 24 and approximately 733 feet of frontage along Flax Mill Road. A single commercial driveway exists off of Flax Mill Road near the center of the lot. The site contains a 59,480 square foot church originally constructed in 1992 and added on to in 2005. The current pole sign at this site was permitted under sign permit number 00-027 on November 8, 2000. That sign is approximately 96 square feet in size. The sign was ultimately installed in a location that fails to meet the required 5-foot front yard setback. Last week, a sign permit was issued to relocate that sign in a manner that complies with the setback by installing a new footing and pivoting the sign to the north, allowing it to then exceed the 5-foot minimum front yard setback. The only other signage at the location includes a crude sign framework that has been installed and a cut through the NDOT right-of-way fence in front of this sign. That would be in violation of both local ordinance and state law concerning right-of-way signage and should be removed and the fence restored or repaired. The subject property is immediately surrounded to the north by agricultural and industrial uses. To the east, a school administrative office and a U.S. highway exist, and across US 24 exists a travel center. To the south, agricultural lands and woods exist with a number of diverse uses beyond the hill. And to the west, agricultural lands and woods exist with a small number of residential uses beyond. The nearest residential properties are 1,500 feet to the south across US 24 and 3,500 feet to the west. In terms of the proposal, the applicant seeks to upgrade the existing pole sign by replacing the current 3-foot 6-inch by 10-foot letter insert reader board with a 4-foot by 10-foot dynamic sign, or EMC. This sign portion is effectively going from 35 square feet to 40 square feet. The dynamic sign portion of the sign would be 28.5%. Subject property is Zone R1 residential. Special sign provisions within the R1 code for churches and institutional land uses allow for static wall or ground signs only. Staff is unable to locate any prior approvals for this property. Since 2010, dynamic signs within the city of Huntington have been considered by the BZA on a site-specific basis through the variance process. A review of all prior cases results in now 19 dynamic signs that have been considered by the BZA, 17 of which have been approved with the strict conditions governing their execution and operation of the signs. The denial of 2 dynamic sign requests in 2017 and 2023 were for dynamic signs proposed within established residential neighborhoods. The 17 signs that have been approved were located within established commercially zoned areas or along major high traffic roadways. Of those, 4 were in areas where residential uses were nearby or adjacent. All other locations were along those busier roadways. Notable was that 2 of the 4 signs were upgrades to existing legal nonconforming dynamic signs, so they were not newly being introduced in the neighborhood. The other 2 signs were for higher traffic count locations, and the dynamic portion of the signs comprised between 25 and 38% of the overall sign area. The history of related approvals and denials thereby establishes the current precedent concerning dynamic signs by this body. The nearest dynamic signs are at the intersection of US 24 and Jefferson Street at the Hardee's Subway and the Learning Center and the Huntington North High School. Dynamic sign approvals have ranged from 10.6 to 75% of the being EMC of the overall sign, with the median being about 35.9. This particular request is for a sign that is 28.5% dynamic. As the board is aware, each approval must be monitored, and dynamic signs represent a unique compliance challenge. The department aims to revisit each site annually to check compliance when compared to other BZA approvals. Programmable signage has a higher problem rate in adhering to conditions of approval. If approved, the board should impress upon the property owner the expectations relating to compliance and avenues for non-compliance, ranging from penalties to revocation. Staff would typically have concerns with the installation of a dynamic sign in a residential district. However, this location being adjacent to a U.S. highway and near a commercialized intersection makes it vastly different from similar institutional uses in an R1 district that may be located in an established residential neighborhood. If a sign permit had not already been issued for the relocation of the sign in a manner that meets the required 5-foot setback, then staff would have detailed that prior instances in which the BZA has required that type of noncompliance to be rectified before granting a variance. To guarantee such happens, a recommended condition has been added to address this. In preparation of your decision tonight, staff's prepared some recommended findings. As always, the board may adopt staff findings, adopt the applicant's findings, create their own findings, or any combination thereof. Number one, the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare because staff finds that the proposed dynamic sign will only comprise a portion of the overall area of the sign. The sign will be installed per manufacturer's specifications and meet Apple safety requirements. The approval will be conditioned accordingly to safeguard against concerns associated with this type of messaging device. Number two, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner because staff finds that this type of sign will have no impact on the overall use of the property, as it will remain unchanged. Dynamic signs have existed along the highway corridor in this area in growing numbers for a number of years. Conditions placed on the approval will reasonably mitigate concerns for undue impacts to nearby residential properties, more so than the existing sign. And number three, the strict application of terms of the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties in the use of the property because staff finds that this facility operates in a segment where many of its seasonal programs, outreach topics, events, and other happenings change frequently. In addition to a preschool is also operated from this location, thereby making a programmable sign a logical choice. The request is for the installation of a pole sign that will include a dynamic sign as a portion of the overall sign and allow the church location to take advantage of modern technologies for advertisement and provide it with a less visually invasive way of advertising a large number and variety of offerings than through temporary signs. Without adequate message conveyance, patronage of this location may be impacted so severely that its viability to exist may also be negatively impacted. Based upon the findings above, staff recommends recommends approval of the request, and if the board finds sufficient evidence to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions of approval: that the existing pole sign shall be moved to meet the required front yard setback, that the sign framework encroaching within the public right-of-way must be removed prior to the issuance of the permit for the dynamic sign, and additional encroachments or banner hanging on the right-of-way fence shall not occur. The approval for the dynamic sign only applies to the pole sign in this general location, that the message change frequency shall be limited to every 6 seconds, that messages shall not be animated, that includes bouncing, waving, scrolling, or actionable text or images, that the sign shall only advertise on-premise messages and no off-premise messages shall be displayed, and that the sign shall not be used as a billboard.
Thank you, Bryn. Any questions for staff?
So the sign has not been physically moved yet.
That is correct. They have poured the other foundation footer for that sign, and so it's my understanding that when they upgrade the EMC, if so approved, that at that time they will then pivot that sign on that backmost leg and rotate it around.
Okay, any other questions?
Can you explain the right-of-way fence and what's been happening with that?
Yeah, I think I have it in a picture here. So I noticed this when I went out to take pictures of the site. So the right-of-way fence here has been either cut or fallen back, and then you've got a kind of a crude T-post framework here of poles and T-posts that, banners for different events. Logically, those events would then be conveyed on the dynamic sign, and the need for that should go away, but NDOT prohibits this sort of encroachment, and the zoning ordinance prohibits this sort of encroachment in the public right-of-way.
Okay, Miranda, could you read findings of fact, please?
Number one, the approval will or will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community because
Will not, per staff finding.
Christopher Penny,
Will not.
Amy Richard,
Will not.
Tanner Babb.
Will not.
Number two, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will or will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner because
Will not, per staff finding.
Tanner Babb,
Will not.
Amy Richard,
Will not.
Christopher Penny.
Will not.
Number three, the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will or will not result in practical difficulties in the use of the property because
Will, per staff finding.
Amy Richard,
Will.
Christopher Penny,
Will.
Tanner Babb.
Will. Okay, at this time, I will entertain a motion for the docket.
I make a motion for approval of docket BZ 26-005 with the following conditions. The existing pole sign will be moved to meet the required front yard setback. Sign framework encroaching within the public right-of-way must be removed prior to the issuance of a permit for the dynamic sign, and the additional encroachments or banner hanging on the right-of-way will not occur. The approval for a dynamic sign applies only to a ground sign, pole sign in this general location. Message change frequency shall be limited to every 6 seconds. Messages shall not be animated. The sign will only advertise on-premise messages. No off-premise messages will be displayed, and the sign will not be used as a billboard.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion has been, it's been motioned and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. Okay, next on the docket, we have BZ-26-006, application filed by the Baldus Company on behalf of First Church of the Nazarene, requesting a variance from development standards to allow a 100.5 square foot pole sign on property located at 1555 Flaxmill Road. If the applicant could speak their name and address and just state their petition.
Andrew Schulenberg with the Baldus Company on behalf of the First Church of the Nazarene. We're asking for to allow a 100.5 square foot pole sign at.
Okay, any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone from the public wishing to give comment? Okay, if not, we'll close the public portion of the meeting. Bryn, could you please read the staff report?
Purpose of sign standards is multifaceted. These standards seek to carefully balance the visual environment of the city. Standards are established to carefully balance the advertising needs of businesses while minimizing potentially dangerous distractions to drivers. Secondly, standards are custom tailored by zoning district, allowing for aesthetic controls that are sensitive to their surroundings and do not cause undue visual clutter or over-commercialization of the visual landscape. Subject property is a 15-acre site on the west side of US Highway 24, the south side of Flaxmill Road, and north of US 24 and West Park Drive. Parcel has approximately 1,300 feet of limited access road frontage along US Highway 24 and approximately 733 feet of frontage along Flaxmill Road. A single commercial driveway exists off of Flaxmill Road near the center of the parcel. The site contains a 59,480 square foot church originally constructed in 1992 and added onto in 2005. The current pole sign at the site was permitted under sign permit 00027 on November 8th, 2000. That sign is approximately 96 square feet in size. Sign was ultimately installed in a location that fails to meet the required 5-foot front yard setback. And as I stated last week, a sign permit was issued to relocate that sign in a manner that complies with the setback by installing a new footing and pivoting the sign to the north to allow it to then exceed the 5-foot minimum front yard setback. The only other signage at this location includes that INDOT cut-through framework of T-posts and poles, as I noted, in violation, and as previously conditioned to be removed. Subject property is immediately surrounded by the following. To the north, agricultural and industrial uses exist. To the east, a school administrative office, US Highway exists, and across the highway exists a travel center. To the south, agricultural land with wood exists and a number of diverse land uses beyond down the hill. And to the west, agricultural land and woods exist with a number of residential uses beyond. The nearest residential properties are 1,500 feet to the south and across US 24 and 3,500 feet to the west. The applicant seeks to upgrade the existing pole sign by replacing the current 3.5 by 6 letter insert reader board with a 4 by 10 dynamic sign or EMC. This portion of the sign is effectively going from 35 to 40 square feet. This would ultimately increase the overall size of the sign to be 100.5 square feet in net size. Other works under this project would include changing the panels and freshening up the paint, all of which are exempt from any other requirements. Subject property is zone R1 residential. Special sign provisions within the zoning code for churches and institutions typically only allow for static wall or ground signs of up to 16 square feet. Pole signs are required, however, to meet the minimum 8 foot of clearance from grade. Staff's unable to locate any prior approvals for this property. The present standards established for institutional use signs within the residential districts were crafted for the for an older style church in an established residential neighborhood, uses in locations such as this along a major U.S. highway and near a signalized intersection with commercial and industrial uses nearby call for signage needs very different from what the ordinance provide for us. The location is directly adjacent to a U.S. highway where larger traffic volumes, about 14,287 vehicles per day, flow at higher speeds between 45 and 55 miles per hour and in a much wider right-of-way at 200 feet across. That overall scale makes it worthy of consideration for a large sign for ease of reusability as opposed to a more urbanized location. If a permit had not already been issued for the location, that would have been detailed and required herein. To guarantee that, staff again recommends a condition for that. Modifications to the sign will need to be made in order to ensure that it maintains a minimum of 8 feet of clearance below grade. In preparation of your decision tonight, staff has prepared some recommended findings. As always, the board may adopt staff's findings, adopt the applicant's findings, create their own findings, or any combination thereof. Staff finds that the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community because the proposed sign will be installed in accordance with all applicable codes. The sign will be similar in size and character to what exists within the area and elsewhere along this roadway. Staff finds that the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner because this type of sign will have no impact on the overall use of the property as it will remain unchanged from what it has been for the past 34 years. Pole signs of similar size have existed in this area for many years. In the strict application terms, the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties in use of the property because staff finds that the location of the sign, some 120 feet from the center line of US 24 and elevated up 8 to 23 feet in the air, makes the larger size necessary to adequately convey messages about services and offerings at this location given the scale of the site, the width of the right-of-way, and the speeds at which passing motorists drive by. Without adequate message conveyance, patronage of the facility may be impacted so severely that its viability to exist may be negatively impacted. Based upon the findings above, staff recommends approval of the request. If the board finds sufficient evidence to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions: that the existing pole sign shall be moved to meet the required front yard setback, that the sign framework encroaching within the right-of-way shall be removed prior to the issuance of a permit for a dynamic sign, and that additional encroachments or banner hanging on the NDOT right-of-way fence shall not occur. The sign shall adhere to a minimum of 8-foot clearance standard, and the variance shall only apply to this sign singularly and not any additional signage at this site that may apply to other tenants or uses or further subdivisions of the property.
Okay, any questions for staff? Okay, Miranda, could you read finding of fact, please?
Number 1, the approval will or will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community because?
Will not, per staff finding.
Tanner Babb,
Will not.
Christopher Penny,
Will not.
Amy Richard.
Will not.
Number 2, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will or will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner because?
Will not, per staff finding.
Christopher Penny,
Will not.
Amy Richard,
Will not.
Tanner Babb.
Will not.
Number 3, the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will or will not result in practical difficulties in the use of the property because?
Will per staff finding.
Amy Richard,
Will.
Christopher Penny,
Will.
Tanner Babb.
Will. At this point, I will entertain a motion for the docket.
I move that docket BZ 26-006 be approved with the following conditions. The existing pole sign shall be moved to meet the required front yard setback. Sign framework encroaching within the public right-of-way must be removed prior to the issuance of a permit for the dynamic sign, and additional encroachments or banner hanging in the right-of-way fence shall not occur. The sign shall adhere to the 8-foot minimum clearance standard, and the variance applies only to this sign singularly and not any additional signage at the site that may apply to other tenants or uses or further subdivisions of the property.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I will second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes.
I've not heard from Ashley, so
Okay.
yeah, we're gonna have to punt till next month for Bowen.
Okay. So because of
2 absences.
2 absences and the need to recuse myself, we're going to have to move the Bowen docket to next month. So you guys will need to talk to Bryn.
It'll be April 6th. So I had not heard from Ashley that she wasn't planning. Obviously, Nori was out of town, so I knew that, but I've not heard from Ashley. So hopefully everything's all right. It's not like her to no-show.
Yeah, so, okay. And I apologize. No. Okay, we will entertain docket BZ-26-010, application filed by Engineering Resources on behalf of Hanjung America Company, requesting a variance from developmental standards to allow for a 10-foot 2-inch variance from the 55-foot maximum height for a primary structure on property located at 2018 Progress Drive. Could the applicant please state their name and address for the recording?
Matt DeCoursey, 10923 Marquette Drive, Zionsville. Representing Michael Kinder and Sons, we're the general contractor for the project.
Okay, and please explain your petition.
Portion of the building, roughly 10 to 15%, closer to 15%, requires significant height for the presses and the overall manufacturing process to work properly. Given a depth of bedrock constraints, which is rather shallow, we're unable to effectively design and engineer a pit deep enough that would allow the, allow the presses to work with the required headroom, thus our request to exceed the maximum height.
Okay, are there any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. At this point, we will entertain any comments from the public. Okay, if not, we will consider the public portion of the meeting closed. Bryn, could you please read the staff report?
Can't give me any break here. Maximum height limitations exist to prevent structures from unduly impacting the character of a property or a general area. Maximum heights for all structures are established by the zoning code to ensure that primary structures are not unduly imposing for the area in which they are located, and accessory structures do not dwarf primary structures. In addition to character, maximum heights can also impact density, view sheds, access to light and air, safety against hazards associated with fire, and aviation safety. Subject parcel is in the process of being platted out as a 34.107 acre in RFW Section 2. A 4-lot final phase build-out of this remaining 133.291 acre parcel under docket PC 26002. So this is an industrial subdivision. The lot will measure more than 880 feet along Progress Drive and more than 1,900 feet deep and feature 2 driveways directly off of Progress Drive. Progress Drive is a public roadway that currently terminates at a cul-de-sac and is being planned for future extension, but will remain a dead end with a cul-de-sac. And let me just pull things up here so you guys get
And Brent, I think that was 808 feet instead of 880.
808, yes, I'm sorry. Just imagine if we had to do 3 more dockets. So this building here on the left is the subject building, just so everybody's clear. The site will feature the following: utility and surface drainage easements, 35 foot along the east property line, a 40-foot split 20 foot on the each side of the north and south property lines, and 20 foot along the rear or west property line. Portions of the Sigmund Heron Baker drain cut across the southeast corner of this particular lot, and the site's elevation is significantly lower than the adjacent area, sitting in the Wabash River Valley and being approximately at an elevation of 730 feet. The site is a good 30 to 60 foot lower than that of adjacent County Road 200 North. The site is generally the same elevation as the land to the west, north, and east. The property was recently granted development plan approval for the construction of a 435,110 square foot manufacturing building at this location. It was noted during that review that a portion of the building, approximately 15%, would feature a maximum building height of 65 foot 2 inches. The building, as proposed, features multiple roof line as depicted in the elevation that was provided, and here's here on your screen. The applicant has stated that the reason for this building height is due to the physical limitations of equipment at this location. Specifically, a mechanical press that is sized to meet the manufacturing needs of this facility and accommodate in terms of height, not only the components being produced, but also room for the press and the structural support of the roof. Due to engineering and cost considerations, the portion of the structure being taller than is permissible is no more than necessary to achieve their end goal. The tallest roof portion of the building will be located at the northwest corner of the site. The vast majority of the building is proposed to be well under the maximum allowable building height. In terms of overall height, when taking into account the elevation difference, the tallest roof at this building would be less than the ground floor elevation of some of the northernmost or First Home and Hunters Ridge subdivisions and units in the middle of Valley View Mobile Home Park. The zoning code limits principal structures in the I-2 district to a maximum height of 55 feet. That is the tallest height allowed in any zoning district, with the exception of exemptions that were provided for items such as water towers, flagpoles, antennas, and church steeples, provided that they don't exceed 150 feet. In terms of prior approvals, docket PC 21003, a rezoning petition to rezone the subject property from Ag to I-2. Docket PC 26002, heard last week by the Planning Commission, a major subdivision primary plat that is in process. While not for the subject property, other nearby industrial buildings have previously received height variances. Docket BZ 13012, a 6-foot height variance at 1725 River Fork Drive, and docket BZ 14009, a 5-foot height variance at 1605 River Fork Drive. Prior to 2015, the maximum height in the I-2 district mirrored most residential district heights. The Huntington Fire Department has been made aware of this height and height variance request and does not express any additional concerns, as other commercial buildings in the downtown urban core around 90 feet and at Huntington University around 70 feet are similar or even taller than this proposed facility. Although outside of any locally regulated airport height restriction overlay, the Huntington Municipal Airport was provided notice of this filing as a courtesy. Other exempt structures far exceeding the proposed height already exist in the area. Those include a 500,000-gallon water tower, some 3,000 feet to the east at 181 feet tall, a cell phone tower 1,800 feet to the south at 283 feet tall, and a cell tower 1,600 feet southwest at 310 feet tall. All of those are the actual height of the improvement, and with the grade of the land and those sort of things, those obviously fluctuate a little bit. In preparation of your decision tonight, staff's prepared some recommended findings. As always, the board may adopt staff's findings, may adopt the applicant's findings, or come up with their own findings, or any combination thereof. Staff finds that the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community because the proposed structure will be constructed with all applicable building and fire codes, and the building will be fully sprinkled. The structure will be set back significantly from the property lines and is being constructed within a developed industrial park in a manner consistent with the character of that larger industrial area. The use and value of the area adjacent to the property, including the variance, will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. Staff finds that the height of the proposed structure will have no underlying impact on the use of the parcel, which is zoned for industrial use. The scale of the site, coupled with its elevation, the size of the building, and the 30-plus acre lots in the industrial park will not lead the site to appear unduly imposing on the established character of the area. In addition, the lot sits in a low area of the river valley, making it of less elevation than land to the south and an equal in terms of land to the north, east, and west. The land to the east of this location in the original River Fork Industrial Park has been used for industrial purposes for more than 50 years with no adverse impacts and features buildings taller than originally allowed by code. 2 wireless communication towers and a water tower in the area already exceed code by a significantly greater amount than the proposed and have not been known to impact the use or value of the adjacent area. And number 3, the strict application terms and zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties in the use of property because staff finds that as detailed in the staff report and in the application, the need for the height variance is due to the physical realities of the site, the manufacturing process, and the size of equipment necessary for the production thereof. The height exceeding portion of the building is also no more than necessary for the specific manufacturing needs relating to a hydraulic press operations and not applying to more of the building overall than necessary. Based upon the findings above, staff recommends approval of the request. If the board finds sufficient evidence to the request, staff recommends the following conditions: that this approval shall apply only to future Lot 4 in RFW Section 2.
Okay, any questions for staff? If not, Miranda, could you read the findings of fact, please?
Number 1, the approval will or will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community because
Will not, per staff finding.
Tanner Babb,
Will not.
Christopher Penny,
Will not.
Amy Richard.
Will not.
Number 2, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will or will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner because.
Will not per staff finding.
Amy Richard,
Will not.
Tanner Babb,
Will not.
Christopher Penny.
Will not.
Number 3, the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will or will not result in practical difficulties in the use of the property because.
Will per staff finding.
Christopher Penny,
Will.
Tanner Babb,
Will.
Amy Richard.
Will.
Okay, at this point, I will entertain a motion for the docket.
Make a motion for approval of docket BZ 26-010 with the condition that the approval apply only to the future Lot 4 in the RFW Section 2.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Yes, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. All right, any discussion items, Bren?
Sorry. Yeah, I was going to spare you guys this as I gave it to the Plan Commission last week in light of the length of the meeting, but since we're a little bit shorter, and congratulations on just being over an hour, I don't know how we did that. A couple of pending legislations in the General Assembly. Last week was the final week of sessions, and so some of this may change. I have not received an update, and I've not had a chance today to dive into that. So a couple of things as it relates to Plan Commission and BZA. House Bill 1001 provides, it is a housing bill. It sounds like it got watered down a little bit with maybe some opt-out provisions. But it provides that the following are permitted uses and approved without hearings. This is the original intent of the bill. That single-family dwellings and duplexes in residential zones and accessory dwelling units within a single-family dwelling, and that affordable housing purchased by a religious institution before January 1, 2025 in a residential or commercial zone. Obviously, that's a little bit of concern. We have a number of lots in the dense urban core that were subdivided and split out. Chris, your lot being one for a decent example. Could you imagine turning your house into a duplex? The first question that I would have would be, where is everybody going to park, right? You pretty much park on the street now for the most part. So this sort of one-size-fits-all local preemption is concerning to me. There are variance processes, there are rule-making processes in which we can tweak things and so on. What's being proposed at the General Assembly level in this particular bill is kind of bad policy, in my opinion. It provides that the following apply to a unit being a unit of government, city, county, town, that sort of stuff. If the unit does not adopt an ordinance that would opt out, prohibits them from requiring more than a specified number of parking spaces for multifamily dwellings, single-family dwellings, or commercial spaces. So parking's a big thing in the Midwest, right? Prohibits unit from regulating design elements of residential structures. That is more architectural control. We don't get into that here in Huntington, but around the donut, around Indianapolis, the Carmel, Zionsville, Brownsburg, those sort of places, that's big stuff. Requires a mixed-use residential or multifamily residential development permitted to be a permitted use in an area zoned commercial. So right now, multifamily residential in all the districts in which it's allowed is a special exception by the BZA. That allows the BZA to look at things, traffic, look at things, parking, screening, those sort of things. That would potentially wipe that out again if this is under that opt-out provision, if that held. Prohibits units from imposing requirements on lot sizes, density, setbacks, and buildings on bulk on certain lots and parcels. Provides that a structure classified as an R2 building occupancy classification that is no more than 3 stories tall and 24 units shall be permitted to have a passenger elevator not larger than an elevator that accommodates a wheelchair. So that's a single lift. That applies more to the building side. Adds a requirement regarding the location of impact zones designated by a unit. provides that after December 31st, 26, if a unit fails to update its zoning ordinance within 1 year of adopting or amending its comprehensive plan, the unit must approve a project that complies with the comprehensive plan or the zoning ordinance. So, which that is perplexing to me because a plan sets policy and not like quantitative measurements or numerical values. And so, boy, you could really make an argument that, oh, well, this project generally complies with the plan, right? It's a lot of words versus numbers. After December 31st, 2026, it restricts a unit's ability to impose and increase fees relating to building permits and approvals. I will tell you that our fees on the building side have not changed since the 90s. They are woefully outdated. It has been on my target list to adjust those. It's just been a low priority target that keeps getting bumped to the bottom of the list by other things. So that is something that we've talked about doing regardless. It's ultimately a decision for council, as it's a fiscal decision. I don't expect that, given the volume of work or permitting that we do here, that every permit is going to, quote, pay for itself. That's just not a reality. The other part of that is that while the subject property that has the permit may benefit from the regulatory oversight and the inspections and things like that, the neighboring properties benefit just as much, if not of similar value, right? If your neighbor's house is constructed and it's a fire hazard and it sits real close to your house, then obviously there's an inherent risk on yours. So I say all that to say that I don't think it's fair that the permittee bear the 100% of the cost of doing business for us for that. We are in the business of making sure that we have quality improvements, quality permit process, safety is paramount, and so we're not looking to make money or even cover costs. We operate at a loss just in the nature of what we do. And so so limiting on that fee, limiting on the fee and restrictions. I did see an update that you would only then be able to increase your fees. I don't even know if it said increase. I think it might have said modify. So even if you wanted to take a fee down, once every 5 years. Again, not that we're on that track record, but I don't like closing that window out if something happens. And then beginning January 1 of 2027 requires the city, to report annually to the IHCDA certain information concerning housing. I don't know what they're trying to get at. I said this during Planning Commission. I wish a disproportionate amount of my time is done completing reports that go to state agencies that I have no idea whether anybody at the state looks at them or what they do with them. I did look at an email I got this evening, and they ask a whole bunch of things. I think they're trying to figure out how many permits for residential units get denied. I don't know that in my 15 years we've ever denied a permit for a residential unit. It may have been a setback issue or a height issue or a off-street parking or some sort of bulk development standard. We've always, and I'm pointing over here, have been able to work with the permittee to resolve that issue to move forward, because we want them to move forward just as much as they want to move forward. So I get that it may be different in 91 other counties, but I don't know what they're getting at, and I don't know that this is the best way to get there. I think the General Assembly is throwing anything and everything relating to housing against the wall to try to see what sticks. I have my own opinions about what the major impacts are on the production of housing coming up to market, affordability and interest rates being the chief among those. But I can tell you, as a region, we have evaluated our permit fees, our turnaround times and things like that. We are a fraction of a percent of a new build, whether that's residential or industrial or commercial or anything like that. And so I don't really feel that those are impacting that.
So Brent, as I've had a little time to think about this from Planning Commission, part of what I wondered is some of this targeted at Airbnbs, that parent who wants to turn their garage into a rental for their kids, they would no longer have to have permits to do any of those things?
I don't know that it's not permits. It's just that if it may not require a hearing, right? Like it may, let's take for an example Amy's lot, because she's got the biggest lot, she's got a carriage house out back, and she's got, there's a certain potential element of nonconformity to that. But let's say Amy didn't have a carriage house in the back, and she said, I want to make a small 1-2-bedroom apartment. I got a kid that's moving home from college, and she can't find housing, and that makes sense, and let's do that. So, that would, in that particular instance, you would have 2 individual dwellings on a lot. So it would no longer be a single-family parcel. It would be a 2-family parcel. If I had to guess, Amy's neighborhood is probably zoned R1 right now, which does not expressly allow for 2-family dwellings. So she would be boxed out in that instance. If she was in a zoning district that allowed 2-family dwellings as maybe a special exception, it would have to go to BZA, have to come here to BZA. If that all applied and all that, wouldn't have to go to BZA. Where we would look at it on that is the lot big enough, lot area per family, right? Is it a cracker box lot, or is it a big lot that there's enough room for parking and lawn areas and the utility services can be provided and all that? You remove that hearing from that, we're not gonna have that sort of qualifying review. You're not gonna have that sort of qualifying review where we can say, hey, are we making problems here that are going to rear their ugly head 6 months or 6 years down the road and then be legalized in perpetuity, right? So those are some of the concerns I have.
So basically, then it all just occurs at your office with whatever you tell people with when they have to pay for fees or licenses for stuff.
Yeah, it just goes through the normal permitting process, right? If it's all good on the land use side, it's an administrative permit through the building side. So that is, I will look at this now when the dust settles and see what the governor signs, and we'll do what we need to do, but it'll probably come back at least before Plan Commission or have some sort of hearing if there's some opt-out provisions. We're gonna have to look long and hard about what we wanna opt in and opt out. I'm under no disillusion that if you opt out, that the state, through their grants or some other incentivization, is not gonna find a way to penalize or otherwise hold you accountable. They've done that with a residential infrastructure financing through the IFA that had allowed low-interest loans for residential development, and there's a question on that application, which of these requirements have you either eliminated or waived? And some of them are things that don't apply to us because we don't regulate that, because they're kind of outside of the area of concern for a community like Huntington. Other things are in there, and as a community, we're going to have to decide through the input seeking and planning process what we're going to hold the line on and what we're willing to cede and things like that. And we've got to think about how this impacts going forward, because we're not always going to be in a housing crunch like we are now. And as you guys have heard me say, the decisions when it relates to land use, you're creating legalities and legal rights that perpetuate, right? It's very, very few and far between in which somebody takes a legal non-conforming land use and throws that right out the window by changing it or doing something or voluntarily waiving it.
But this might change the way we look at how we zone some areas in terms of the city plan, because it's going to allow potentially more flexibility and freedom for the individuals versus control from the city.
Conceivably, but also I don't know what the particulars of the final bill are going to be. If you can't do that, are they going to eliminate your ability to say, oh, lot sizes need to be whatever they are? And that's how we typically do it now for multiple dwellings on a lot, right? It's density is what you get at. And Indiana's not going to take well to a New York City density, not that that's what they're proposing, but, 8 acres per lot is a lot different than, or 8 units per acre is a lot different than 30 units per acre. And there's all sorts of things that go along with that, right? Parking, infrastructure, traffic, and there's just a whole bunch of things to consider. So, anything else on that particular bill? House Bill 1161, another one. This applies to you guys, and this is where my concern is. Provides that individuals who are appointed to certain boards, committees, or other bodies in a county that does not have a consolidated city, so that would be Indianapolis only, so it's everybody but Indianapolis, serve at the pleasure of the appointing authority, so long as 1, that office holder who appointed the individual continues to hold office, or 2, the board, committee, or body that appointed the individual retains all the same members who served when the individual was appointed. So As you are aware, we did the rule of procedure update to incorporate some things in state law. Removal of BZA members can only be done by the appointing authority for cause. You cannot be reappointed when your term is up, but to remove one of you mid-term has to have cause. And what cause is has been deeply litigated in the courts, right? What it isn't is, you have to do something that is so egregious that it, affects your impartiality or, any number of things. What it isn't, and what it would be under this, is you said no to a request from somebody that lives next door to a city councilman or is related to somebody. It totally injects politics into that, and that appointing authority can say, you're gone. And so the big concern from the statewide, from the planners group is, especially as it relates to BZA, is you guys know how insulated you are from the political process, right? You can't be talking to people at grocery stores, and you can't be talking to neighbors about stuff at the BZA outside of the hearing to be unduly influenced. You're quasi-judicial. You have that sort of rulemaking authority and final decision authority that only gets appealed through the judiciary, and so that throws that out there. Now you are political appointees serving at the will. Do I, in this current administration framework environment that we're in locally, have concerns? No. Does it mean it'll change in the future? Change is a constant in life. So unfortunately, I believe that one made it through. I don't know where it's coming out of or whatever, but that's that one. Any questions on that? This one, I believe, died in committee. Requires development that is sited on land, 1, in an area zoned agricultural, and 2, comprised of certain capability classes of soil to be a permitted use. So what you got to do is you got to get out the USDA soil map. And so if anybody's ever looked at one of those, you get to see what soil types are. And this goes directly towards data centers and electric generation facilities. And so this was a bill that would allow, one of the many arguments against data centers or any of those alternative type energy products or uses is the consumption of agricultural land in farming Indiana. And so what they're trying to say here is, hey, if you're going to locate on the porous soil, go for it. Don't take prime farm ground, which I get that could, be a consideration. But to, again, allow it as a right without any public hearing, zoning be darned, all those sort of things, I think it makes for bad land use policy. This was in there as well. I think this is decent. Allows a plan commission, board of zoning appeals, or county or municipal legislative body to require a person to provide their name and address in writing in order to speak at a public hearing regarding certain matters. It allows the body's presiding officer to give consideration to whether the person is a county resident or has an interest as an owner, lessor, or lessee, or life tenant in real property within the county in deciding, 1, the order of speakers, and 2, the amount of time allotted to speakers at the hearing. We don't have people sign in. We just have them state their name and addresses at the record, at the microphone. Some communities have a sign-in sheet, or if you have a big contentious hearing, you'll say, okay, we're gonna have a sign-in sheet so Miranda doesn't have to try to keep up and transcribe. Some of those more contentious hearings can go late into the night, and so, how long do you go? Who do you give priority to, especially with some of the, solar data, wind, those sort of contentious hearings or fights. You have outside folks that may not have what we would consider to be a vested interest in that fight or in that community come in and speak. And so it's all about trying to make sure that those with the most skin in the game are heard. Again, I think this bill died in committee. I think there may be some, in that particular last half, there may be some worthwhile considerations in there, but I don't necessarily identify that as a problem needing a legislative correction, and at least for us. So once the General Assembly dust settles and the governor signs bills into law, I'm sure I will get an update on what is what, and there will be some things that we need to do, probably more so than in normal years. Most of the stuff is administrative, right? How we handle things behind the scenes kind of in the administrative process. I think some of these housing, especially House Bill 1001, is going to require some hearings and some planning, so to speak. Any other questions for me?
No. Any other discussion items? Okay. Any from the citizens? No. Any items of discussion by board members? Okay. Bryn, director's report?
Yeah, you guys, short meeting, so I didn't have anything prepared because I expected we'd go, Miranda and I were making bets, we figured 9 probably. So good job knocking that one out. Unfortunately, we will plan on meeting again to do the Bowen. We'll make sure everybody's good. Go ahead and mark that on your calendars for April 6th at 6:30. Save your packets. I will not send you new stuff unless somebody tells me they need them or they lose them. And we will for sure make sure that we have a quorum. If there are no other items on the agenda, then Tanner, you can stay home, since how you'll be conflicted out as was decided this evening. So if you can get that lucky.
Say that now, but you know something's going to come up.
Who jinxed us last time? Other than that, you guys all got the annual report. I sent that out via email. And so, as always, if there's anything that you have questions or concerns on, again, you know, Tanner gets the Plan Commission, the BZA side. Chris has been involved in Redevelopment Authority, so he knows some of that stuff. Amy, you got a preservation background, so you're kind of familiar with that, and I'm sure that stuff speaks to you. But the 30-some page report covers all the facets and all the areas in which our little staff of 3 dabbles in every day, and so it's diverse. And some days you want to pull your hair out, but it's all in there. And so take a look. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, find any errors, anything like that, let me know. Council got theirs at the last meeting. The mayor will be giving his state of the city, and much of what he talks about in the state of the city comes from individual department reports, right? Because that formalizes sort of stuff. So that'll be happening. But as always, I appreciate everyone's commitment to the service on the boards and commissions in which you sit on. Your time, energy, and expertise is invaluable for this community, and it's often unsung, but I appreciate it.
Okay. If there's nothing else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. We're adjourned.